Great. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's great to meet you, those of you who've arrived, and those of you who are watching the recording. It's great to, be speaking to you too, and I hope you'll get in touch if you have questions later on. This is our small, info session about the Middlebury Schools Abroad, and I'll give a little bit of information about programs generally, and then we've got 3 programs that are affiliated with Northwestern, and I'll talk about each of those a little bit. And I'm going to leave a lot of time for questions. So if you have them, wonderful. If not, again, I'm very open to emails later on or individual advising sessions. So just to give you a little information about the Middlebury Schools Abroad and what we do, there are a few things that categorize and characterize our programs generally. The first thing and the biggest thing is our commitment to linguistic and cultural immersion. So we're looking for students who really want to take full advantage of their time abroad, make connections, really get to know the sense of the place. And one way we do that is through what's called the Middlebury Language Pledge. So on most of our programs, and all 3 of the affiliated programs, there's a pledge, and we have students on the program who already have a background in the language. So if that's in Latin America, that's going to be 5 semesters or the equivalent of college level Spanish. If it's China, then it's going to be 4 semesters of Mandarin. And once you arrive, you are taking literally a pledge. You're signing your name and saying, for all program related activities, all courses, all your housing, interaction, excursions, activities, that's all going to be in the language. And I don't want to scare you away. There are certainly moments in which, we know you'll be speaking English. We want you to be in touch with your family back home. We know that you'll probably maintain those connections with folks in an emergency or when you really need to express something away from the other program participants. That's not a violation of the pledge. But this is something we take very seriously, and we tend to attract the students who are really excited about this opportunity to spend a semester or a full year even just, committing themselves to language immersion. Immersion, though, is also we define it more broadly than language. We think of it as academic immersion in some cases. So for example, in Latin America, either in Uruguay or Brazil, students are taking courses directly with local students. In China, they're living with Chinese roommates. So there are lots of points and elements of immersion that students get on our program. So we're really excited about that. As I already said, we take students with an intermediate to advanced level of language. And another thing that sets our students apart and who look for our programs is they want a sense of independence, and they have a desire to explore. So a common, I think, misconception about the Middlebury programs is that, they're very rigorous and they're very, immersive, and we want to get you out into the community. That's all true, but it doesn't mean that we are setting you off into the world with no support. So we call this guided independence. We definitely want students to make the experience the most. When they study abroad, they probably have some goals for what they're looking for, and we help them to carry out those goals, and we support them through the whole process. So I'm going to start by talking about Hangzhou, China, and it's my background here on beautiful West Lake, which if you are studying Mandarin, maybe you've heard about it. It sort of shows up in a lot of classical literature. It's also known as the Garden City because of all the greenery around in the city. As I said before, there are 4 semesters required to go on the program, and you're going to be speaking Chinese the whole time. It's based at Zhejiang University of Technology. That doesn't mean that you're going to be taking courses at the university. So with just 4 semesters of Chinese, you're going to be taking mostly advanced Chinese language courses, but they're also going to have a content focus. So not just grammar, but a lot of vocabulary and content, which hopefully you can use to apply to your major. And that's a question for your department chairs. But it's based at this university, which is a good way to get to know Chinese students. And we match everyone with a Chinese roommate so they can be a bridge to the wider community in the city and the university itself. And that turns out to be, I guess, probably the most exciting and rewarding part of the program. A lot of students come back and they've made these really nice connections with their roommates who were able to, take them home for a holiday or help them explore some part of the region, the Hangzhou, Zhejiang region, that otherwise they wouldn't have known to explore. And there are a lot of activities around Hangzhou. Often there's an excursion to pick tea leaves and learn about that industry, doing Tai Chi. There's a lot of hiking, pottery, cooking, painting. And a lot of those activities are sort of workshops with the roommates. Some of them are organized by the program, but there's a lot going on and students do really get involved. So in terms of academics, there are 4 courses everyone takes. So the first one is a core course in Hangzhou studies. So you're learning about the city and the region as it relates to current events, history, literature, film, and it's a good way to learn about your host community. And everyone takes a one-to-one tutorial where they are working with an instructor on whatever it is they want. So if you have a specific discipline that you need credit for, or just an interest that you otherwise wouldn't have been able to work on, we match you with one person who can help you do research in that area. You won't be able to do, a lab science, for example. We don't have the resources on our site to match everyone with any kind of discipline, but most students in humanities, social sciences are able to really hone in on something that interests them. And then there are 2 electives that students can choose from. So as you can see, there's a whole range, film, literature, newspaper reading. There is business Chinese is basically an econ class, and you get the vocabulary to sort of learn about business in China as well. Contemporary issues in China, ancient Chinese history, classical Chinese. So there's a range for you, and there are a few that are specifically for advanced students. So advanced spoken Chinese, for example, are for students who maybe have a little more than the prerequisite of 4 semesters. So I just have those 2 short slides about Hangzhou. And since I know there are people on the call who are specifically interested in this, I want to pause before starting to talk about Latin America. Do you have any questions that I can go over before moving on? Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask if is that the complete course list that is offered every year?
Yeah, so it might change a little bit from year to year. I haven't seen it change in the past maybe 3 years. This is the course list that's been continued, and we try not to guarantee anything. So if you're thinking about next year or maybe 2 years, I wouldn't want to say, yes, absolutely, you can definitely take contemporary issues in China, because if it changes, we don't want you to be disappointed later on. But my guess is that this is what's going to be offered in the next few semesters at least.
Okay.
Having said that, I do want to note that our program in China has been suspended for the past few semesters. We're not going to run it this coming spring. It's just been decided today. So we are really hoping that fall of next year will be possible again. Travel restrictions due to COVID are really what's stopping us from being able to send students. They're not able to get a visa still, but we're hoping that next year that will be different.
Can I ask, Catherine, is there ever a situation where you might be able to offer, a program in China in a city that's not Hangzhou? So like you might run your Beijing program, but not the Hangzhou program.
Yeah, we have definitely thought of that in the beginning of the pandemic when things were looking particularly bad in Beijing. For example, we were thinking, okay, we'll just run Hangzhou. We also have a program in Kunming. So we've got these 3 sites. The issue right now is with the visa. So it's not a matter of this location is safer or offers more resources. It's just a matter of getting into the country as a whole. But yeah, in general, if something were to happen and we couldn't run Hangzhou, but we could run Kunming or Beijing, we would absolutely let students make that switch.
And can you comment on what the kind of general program size is for Hangzhou and what you expect it might look like maybe once you're able to reopen?
Yeah, I would say 10 to 15 students in a cohort every semester. So it's a very small program consistently, and I would expect it to be a little larger. Once we can start offering programs again, I think there is a lot of pent up demand. Students have been waiting to go on these programs for a long time, and they keep having to defer their applications. So it's possible we'll have, maybe 20 to 25. And I think that's where our cap would be. We really like to maintain a high faculty to student ratio, and we need a roommate for every student. So I don't think it would get higher than that. It's also nice to have a tight knit group. And then, of course, if we ran out of space in Hangzhou, but we still had space in Beijing, for example, we would allow that, easy changing between applications. Although I know that the Hangzhou program is the one that's affiliated with Northwestern. So that would also be a question for those of you on the call. If you're thinking like, oh, Kunming, I'd really like to go there. That would be a question with the study abroad office or the global learning office. Great. If there aren't other questions, I'll move on to the next site. And then I'll talk a little bit about finances and applications at the end. So the second location is for students of Portuguese. It's in Niterói, Brazil. This one is actually, it requires 4 semesters of Portuguese, not 5. Niterói is not as well known as Rio, but it is right across the bay. It's really easy access to this like vibrant city, but it is a smaller city. I think more manageable is what I keep hearing. It feels safer and just, especially for those of you coming from a small town like me, it might be a little bit easier of a transition than going directly to Rio. But students are living with host families. Every student is with a host family. There are a lot of activities that they do either with the program or outside of the program. For example, tours of the city, gastronomy fairs, museums, samba schools. The director is very interested in samba. Soccer stadiums, of course, handicraft fairs, beaches. As you can see, they also do trips to the islands and the nearby mountains. So lots to explore in Niterói. The academics there's going to be a little bit more of a range, actually a lot more of a range than the China program, just because students are directly enrolling at the Universidade Federale Fluminense. So they are basically going in as international students, and they have, again, all the support of our program staff. So any bureaucratic issues or social issues they're going through, they have that support. They can get tutorials for language if they need that. But otherwise they are taking courses in whatever is offered at the university. There are a few highlights. So they're especially known for international relations, humanities and social sciences, sociology of race relations, environmental studies. That's not to say you can't take, biology. That exists too, but those are what the university is known for. There's also a writing course through Middlebury. So that is to help with your writing and your intercultural competence also. So, making observations of what you're experiencing, doing some reflection about that. And for Brazil in particular, there is an emphasis on learning about Afro-Brazilian cultures, which is in Brazil, that's part of the curriculum statewide. It's just, it is obligatory. It's just, this has to be part of what we're talking about. So it's part of our writing course. It'll probably be, as you can see, sociology of race relations. It's probably going to be a topic that comes up in a lot of the classes. So that's definitely of interest to the director, whose background is in Black studies. And there's just a lot going on if those are interests of yours. There are also internship options, and we allow students to replace a course with an internship, which has an academic component to it. So you can take on an internship of 10 to 14 hours per week and write an academic paper alongside it. It's going to be up to Northwestern, again, whether you grant credit for an internship. So if that's not something you can do, you can still have the experience. And maybe Carrie, you can answer that question if that's a possibility.
Yeah, so as long as Middlebury deems it a course, then it is recognized for credit at Northwestern, but it's up to the individual department whether it can be articulated to fulfill major, minor distribution requirements. And in my experience, most departments typically do not recognize internship credit toward degree progress. So you'll get a credit, but it will most likely be an elective.
Okay. Great. And I mean, a lot of students will say this was the best part of their time abroad is getting to be in a work environment, getting to know people, learning very specific language, learning about the work culture in another place, which is really valuable and something you can put on your resume, even if you're not getting credit. So as you can see, there's a whole range of different internships, and that's not an exhaustive list. It's just what recent students have done. So I'll talk about Uruguay next. The program is in Montevideo, the capital, it's a really large city for Uruguay. It's about half of the population of the whole country. And for this one, 5 semesters of Spanish are required. It's similar to the program in Brazil in that students live with host families, they're getting really involved with university life. And just like in Brazil, they can go to university clubs, sports. There's a lot of arts kinds of groups, choirs and theater and that kind of thing, and all the things that a big city has to offer. Of course, museums, theaters, beaches. There's nightlife. And then for the academics in Uruguay, it's the same structure. So you're directly enrolling at a host university. And we actually have 3 different ones in Montevideo, plus a writing course. And you can substitute an internship for one of the classes at the university. Since there are 3 universities to choose from, if you're interested in the school in Uruguay, I would suggest making an appointment with our advisor. We have advisors for each of our programs. And if you want to talk through what each of the universities has to offer and make a choice based on, your academic needs or, what kind of university size you're looking for, Alessandra in our office will, virtually meet with you and be happy to talk through the different, pros and cons of the universities. We also have 2 special tracks in Uruguay. So we have an architectural studies track and a neuroscience track for students who really want those specific courses. It doesn't mean that you can't take other courses. Of course, the whole range of disciplines is available to you at the universities, but we do have specific departments that have really, been good for our students. They've put together a really good combination of courses and internships, and we want to highlight those possibilities for future students. So in terms of the application, our deadlines are March 15th for the fall or academic year, October 1st, which passed for the spring semester. Keep in mind the Northwestern deadlines as well. They are kind of similar, but you'll want to make sure you're doing everything you need internally for Northwestern and also separately applying to us. The requirements, I already mentioned the language prerequisites, but we also need to see a B average in your major and your language courses and a B- average overall. And then to apply, we have a portal online. You can access it from our website pretty easily. And we need a personal statement just about why you want to study abroad, why you're choosing this place, a sample of your writing in the language. And that can be anything. There's no specific length requirement. It's mostly just so we can see what feedback you've gotten from professors, if it's a graded paper, and also where your grammar is at right now. We have a language assessment form from a faculty member. We need approval from your study abroad office, of course, transcript, a copy of your passport, which if you don't have a passport yet, you can still apply, and we'll encourage you to apply as early as possible. I think especially now, if you don't have a passport, it's taking longer to get them. So make sure you're working on that ahead of time. And then we also have a fee of $75. And thank you, Carrie, for the correction. Thank you. The spring semester deadline is September 10th, and the spring quarter deadline is November 10th. And And then in terms of finances, you can actually bring your Northwestern financial aid. It will apply for these 3 affiliated programs. We also have a few small grants. So we have what's called the Mellon Research Grant of up to $2,800. If you have a project in mind that you can do while you're abroad and then apply to a senior project or a thesis of some kind, you can apply for that grant. And then we have a sustainable study abroad grant. It's smaller, it's about $500, but if there's something that you want to do, sustainability is something that Middlebury has a focus on in addition to language. So we want to encourage that kind of research as well. And we define sustainability pretty broadly. So if you have an idea, please do apply for that. We also have financial aid available for our summer programs, not our semester programs, unfortunately, but for all of our summer programs, we have aid. It's first come, first serve. So I always encourage people to apply early, and all of our summer program applications are now open. So I'll just briefly talk about those, starting with the summer language schools. So this is something that's really useful for students to know if they are not quite ready linguistically to go on the semester program. So if you, for example, you want to go to Brazil, but you've only had 2 semesters of Portuguese, you can come to Vermont and study the language really intensively over the summer. These are 7 and 8 week long programs, fully immersive. So there's the language pledge again, and they're the equivalent of a full year of language studies. So definitely worth it if you're nervous about going into the immersion experience for a semester abroad, or if you haven't reached the prerequisite. That's what I did before studying abroad, and I'm so glad I did. It really boosted my confidence, and I was able to then integrate better into the university and make more connections that way. There are 12 languages, and they are for all levels. So if you want to start a new language, you can do that. If you are an advanced student, you can still come to the language schools. We have graduate degrees as well. So just keep that in mind if you need it. We have a program that's called the Middlebury School of the Environment. It is 6 weeks long. It has interdisciplinary coursework in environmental studies and a real focus on leadership training through workshops with environmental leaders. It's usually in Yunnan, China, but because again, you can't get a visa to go to China, we're actually going to hold this program in Monterey, California this year at our graduate institute called the Middlebury Institute of International Studies. So if you're interested in the environment and you want to do something over the summer and it's looking like study abroad isn't as possible, or studying in China isn't feasible, then Monterey, California is a great place to talk about issues of water, agriculture, forest fires, forestry in general. There are a lot of great topics. And then we have a museum studies in Oxford program. It's 5 weeks long, 2 classes, how British museums work and perspectives on heritage. The first week of the program is a practicum at this 18th century estate called Compton Verney. And again, just as with all of the summer programs, there's financial aid available. So that is my presentation. I do want to leave time for questions, and there already were a few, but if there are any others, I'm happy to delve into any of these programs in more detail.
Catherine, since I get this question a lot, can you talk about the process by which students can demonstrate their 4 or 5 semesters of college level Spanish or Chinese or Portuguese if they have not taken that coursework at Northwestern?
Yes, so there are a few ways, and often we will encourage them to take a class, even if they grew up speaking the language, just to show that their writing skills are going to be ready for a university experience, for example. We will often say you should take, a 5th semester Spanish class, anything. It could be literature or film or history or something taught in Spanish that's not grammar based. That's going to be, for a student who's already at that advanced level, just to prepare in the university setting. And if that's not really applicable, we can do interviews. So we'll do oral proficiency interviews with the students. Our staff will do it. It's usually it's if they're already applying, then our staff abroad will meet with them. But we do like to You know, especially if a student isn't a heritage speaker, didn't grow up speaking the language, and maybe they're self-taught, or they, you know, did a lot in high school, but they haven't taken anything at the college level. We really want to make sure that all of their language skills, not just speaking and listening, but reading and writing, are going to, you know, make them successful on the program. So I would say if that's your situation, don't feel like you can't apply. We do want to see university level coursework in the language, but if it doesn't work for you, please get in touch and we'll look at your case individually. And we don't have a proficiency exam as part of our application process. As I said, we're looking for a recommendation from a language faculty member. We're looking for a writing sample. We're going to look at what courses you've taken, what shows up on your transcript. But there are, of course, cases where, you know, students don't fit into those categories. Very good question.